Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. Today we're back with the Empire, going to be taking on Norsca, so let's get to the army compositions. My forces are going to be led by Supreme Patriarch Balthazar Gelt here. He's got just Final Transmutation. We've also got the Tempelhof Luminark, of course, with its Net of Ammontok, the Locus of Hysh, and the Aura of Protection as well. We've got 2 units of Reichsguard over here, one of which is the Zintler's Reichsguard. Main line is going to be a mix of Spearmen with Shields with Flagellant and the Sigmar's Sons. One more Reichsguard here in the center, as well as some Faith Demis. We've got the Royal Altar of Griphites supported by a Warrior Priest. As you guys have come to expect, for my opponent's army, he's got the Beasts of Tashnar here, Vanguard deployed with the Maws of Savagery, Regiment of Renowned Skinwolves with their anti-large AP. He's got Wulfric the Wanderer and a Death Shaman here. He's got 1 unit of Marauder Champions, some Marauder Spearmen, some regular Marauders, Norscan Ice Wolves, the Famir Miststalkers, some Berserkers, and yeah, looks like Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna on that Death Sorcerer, or sorry, Shaman. So without further ado, let's get the battle underway. You can see Beasts of Tashnar and the Maws of Savagery both pursuing the Zintler's Reichsguard here. However, the Las Cannon opening up shots, taking down 3 unit models of the Maws of Savagery there. Of course, those 3 unit models won't be able to regenerate, but we've been able to make it close enough back to our lines that I can start supporting with Reichsguard and some of these other units here. Meanwhile, Balthazar goes over to lay down Cheese Face on Wulfric the Wanderer here, putting a nice overcast Final Transmutation. Wulfric's going to wander into the range and do a little bit of damage to these Norscan Ice Wolves as well. But the Luminark continuing to fire away for the moment, at least at these Maws of Savagery. We managed to get them down to 14 unit models. Since they had dropped their attack order, we went ahead and took out these isolated Beasts of Tashnar here. But the Las Cannon now going to open up shots on Wulfric himself. He takes a direct hit there, bring him down to only 1,300 hit points, and the Beasts of Tashnar here doing a little bit of scouting, get caught out by the Royal Altar of Griphites, Net of Ammontok going down on Wulfric there, and yeah, these Ice Wolves, because they do count as large, will be subject to the anti-large bonus of the Royal Altar of Griphites here. Now we're going to come in and start to deal with the Famir, these Miststalkers here. Unfortunately, I did mistime my Soulfire a little bit there. I had meant to do it so that it would give these Royal Altar of Griphites some magic resistance against the Miststalkers, since of course they do magic damage. But we're just going to have to settle for the Hammer of Sigmar for now. They should be able to get some solid damage done against the Miststalkers, although they do have 56 melee defense, so they're going to be pretty tanky in this engagement here. Meanwhile, all across the line, Reichsguard charging in, doing some really good shock damage on these Marauders initially, and then we're going to be following up with the Infantry Corps next. Looks like another Las Cannon shot, actually doing a bit of friendly fire there, taking down 3 of those Royal Altar of Griphites, so that was definitely unfortunate. You know, it wouldn't be one of my replays using the Luminark if I didn't get a little bit of friendly fire here, but the Flagellant's actually going to catch the Berserkers without the Berserkers getting their charge. Fate of Buna going down, it looks like, on the Reichsguard, so they're probably going to be off the field, but Zintler's Reichsguard also doing quite well for themselves. Actually, those Reichsguard did manage to hang around despite that Fate of Buna there, so yeah, the Luminark is still at the moment focused on Wulfric, although it doesn't have an open line of sight. Unfortunately, my opponent did forget these Marauder Champions back here, which is, you know, about 8% of his army or so, so that's pretty unfortunate. But Las Cannon shot misses narrowly here on Wulfric the Wanderer, but Reichsguard going to be charging back around. I'm going to pull these Royal Altar of Griphites since they're getting pretty low on HP and models. We're going to pull them out of this engagement and probably try and go after Wulfric here in just a moment, at least I think. Looks like my opponent pulling back the Miststalkers. I'm also going to pull back the Griphites there. Reichsguard charging into the side of these Marauders here. And I believe we're going to drop one more Final Transmutation. You can see Gelt maneuvering around up in the air. State troops getting in here, especially the Sigmar's Sons will trade quite well against the Berserkers here. One missed Las Cannon shot, keeps hitting the trees unfortunately. But you see the Final Transmutation goes down here. And Wulfric had just ran out of the area effect, but he runs barely back into the corner here, and that's actually going to be enough to take him down. So barely a little bit of this micro for my opponent there. That's the Final Transmutation's also probably going to finish off those Miststalkers as well, but Wulfric goes down, turned into a statue by Gelt, and the Miststalkers get routed off as well. And with that, the balance power is going to turn pretty decisively in the Empire's favor. You can see a lot of the Norscan units starting to rout off at this point, so pretty good for me. The Templehof Luminark doesn't have a whole lot of high-value targets left, especially since this Shaman Sorcerer is getting so low. So we're just going to go ahead and pop shots at this unit of Spearmen here. Go ahead and use the Bound, Net of Ammontok, and just point blank blast them. Beautiful stuff. Meanwhile, the Reiksguard coming through, just dragging these guys down in this pocket here, trying to finish things off, and at this point, it's pretty much critical army losses for the Norskins, more or less. Only the Shaman Sorcerer holding out at this point, and of course, the few Brutes of the Hound that are left being unbreakable. But yeah, honestly, Fate of Buna, I see people still try and bring it some, but it's not nearly as good as it used to be, especially against elite cavalry. It's more so better against elite infantry, and since the Empire can't really bring all that much elite infantry, I really think that you're better off to go with other spells. Casting Spirit Leech on cavalry can actually be pretty effective because it takes down a couple of unit models. And, you know, if you keep spamming it, you can definitely take down units over time. Obviously, it doesn't do as much damage as Fate of Buna per se, but, you know, you get more efficiency out of it, certainly. So we'll go ahead and fast forward as my guys try and run down these last few Brutes of the Hound here, who are just getting absolutely clobbered by everything, but still, of course, holding out to the end. So, well played my opponent. Hope you guys enjoyed watching that one. It's a pretty interesting matchup. My opponent there, I mean, obviously, having the Maws of Savagery and the Norscan Ice Wolves get caught out there so early on was pretty rough. I didn't show, but after the Maws of Savagery had got blasted a few times by the Luminark, we came in with those two Reiksguard that had cleaned up the Beasts of Tashnar, and then rolled over and cleaned up the Maws of Savagery as well. Because they only have 70 armor, they'll take quite a bit of shock damage on the charge from Reiksguard, even though they're not necessarily anti-large troops. 70 armor is good, but it's not good enough to stop like the 60+ charge bonus that the Reiksguard have, so they can really lance down, especially once the Skinwolves have taken a lot of losses, and of course the losses they had took there, they weren't able to regenerate back because the Luminark just one-shots the unit models. So that in and of itself was pretty rough. Catching out the Norscan Ice Wolves with the Demis was also pretty rough for my opponent. Just overall, I think the Luminark kind of forced him into a bit of a panic mode, and so he ended up making a few micro mistakes. That last one, though, running in with Wulfric into the edge of that area of effect, was definitely dangerous. I mean, Wulfric was on a bit of a timer anyway. He had the Luminark continuously shooting at him, and Gelt was going to try and probably dive down if that final transmutation didn't finish him off, because Gelt does have a pretty solid charge bonus on his Pegasus there. So, yeah, could have potentially finished him off in that regard, but thankfully for me, he really wanted to be a statue, just ran back in the area of effect there and got final transmuted. You can see the Sigmar Sons also, 92 kills, not too bad at all, racking up quite a few against the Marauders and Berserkers and so on. Forgetting the Marauder champions was pretty rough, although I don't know that they would have made that much of a difference in the battle. Personally, I think that you cut the Maws of Savagery here. I honestly just don't feel like Skinwolves are that effective right now. Even the Maws of Savagery with their armor-piercing, anti-large, aren't as good as they used to be, and that has a lot to do with the way that melee stats work in terms of attack and defense in Game 2 versus Game 1. So let's talk about that a little bit. So even the Maws of Savagery here, only 39 melee defense, which is pretty decent, but for their price, it's not so good, especially when you can compare it to Famir with great weapons, which have, I mean, obviously they're not as fast, but they do have the armor sundering. They have more or less equivalent combat stats, more weapon strength as well, which also matters for quite a bit. They have the missile resistance, obviously no regeneration, but they also have much heavier armor, and yeah. Just overall, I think they're a more cost-effective unit. Maws of Savagery are the most cost-effective of the Skinwolves, but even then, like the regular Skinwolves and the armored Skinwolves, you don't really see these guys that much because their armor-piercing values are pretty poor. 21 armor-piercing, it's a pretty close to 50-50, honestly, but I just feel like they're not quite where they should be. Maybe Creative Assembly needs to potentially look at buffing their melee defense slightly, or some of their other metrics. Maybe you give them a bit more health or something. I'm not really sure. You guys will have to give me your thoughts in the comments down below how you would buff Skinwolves, but they definitely seem pretty underpowered right now. Famir are just hands down better in almost every situation. Against the Empire, it can be a bit tricky because they do have a lot of armor-piercing missiles, so it's certainly a very dynamic matchup. But I do think you want to go with a little bit more of a swarm-type strategy. So rather than taking the 2 elite regiments of renown, actually the Miststalkers are not a bad idea because, because of course they have stock, not going to be shot up by artillery on the approach quite as much as other Famir, so they'll do pretty well in that regard. Going with Marauders can be pretty decent. Throg or Wulfric both have their own up and down sides in this particular matchup, but let's just say for the sake of argument we stick with Throg here, or sorry, Wulfric, and Foe Seeker we might want to keep, but yeah, Brave Shame Lore of Death, not bad. I'm actually going to go with the Bale Fiend though instead, with the Lore of Shadows. That's going to be pretty good against Empire Cavalry. Of course, the Melkos Mystifying Miasma helping to drag them down. Enfeebling Foe can help counter the Faith buffs. When you see that go down, pop the Enfeebling Foe on the appropriate units, or unit rather. And then of course Penumbral Pendulum just gives you another wind spell to layer on top of the boat to help clear out a light infantry line very quickly. And then in terms of anti-cav tools, a couple of Marauder Horsemen and Throwing Axes to try and bait them out of position. The Beasts of Tashnar and the Norscan Ice Wolves are a solid idea, although I would keep them maybe not quite so deep in Vanguard, and also try and keep them a little bit together. Maybe 1 unit of Famir with Great Weapons wouldn't be a bad idea. Let's see what else here. You also could get some Berserkers in the front line, and maybe we go with something like this, a pretty effective swarm. We've got a couple of skirmish cav, a couple of fast attack units to get on artillery or fleeing cavalry or something, and then a couple of elite kind of pounders for the cavalry and other type of units. But let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. What kind of builds do you like to take with Norsca versus the Empire? I appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much for your support. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.